I think often people are looking at the hack for the body, but they're not looking at what's the hack for the emotional self or the mind or the spiritual self. So it's important to look at these approaches, get at many lenses on the interesting thing in the Petri dish, which is our consciousness, right? We see it morphing and we go, oh, what's that? And we can get a bit hooked or attached to a particular nuance, but then we can zoom out and say, okay, well, what are my blessings? What am I grateful for? What are the good things in my life? Okay, how can I amplify those? So again, sometimes it's the idea of just switching the mental awareness from pain to what's pleasurable or joyful. That can be the switch.
Hello and welcome to the Biohackher Podcast. I'm Azra Ulagich, your host and founder of Biohackher. I'm an integrative nutrition health coach specializing in longevity for women, a health and wellness journalist, writer, corporate consultant, and a biohacking advocate. Biohackher is a space where we can explore ways to optimize our health to live well longer. Whether it's through improving our nutrition, exercising, cryotherapy, supplementation, technology, and more, I'll be bringing you information and interviews with the best longevity experts to help you understand what you can do to optimize your health, prevent disease, and slow down or even reverse the symptoms of aging by taking control of your unique bio-individuality. Want to know more? Let's dive in. Lawrence, welcome to the Biohacker Podcast. You've spent decades immersed in healing traditions. What brought you into that space?
Well, it's quite an interesting process. I was actually originally pursuing a career in graphic design and art direction, so advertising, all that stuff. Yeah, very different. And at the same time, in parallel with that, I was very interested and always called to spirituality and what operates outside the ordinary five senses. Like what's beyond all that. And I actually was going to a spiritual talk, which I was running really late for. And in my rush to, get a parking spot, there was one spot on the wrong side of the road. And I just quickly ducked my car in there and raced in. And then when I got to the talk, I realized I didn't have any money on me. So I had to run back to the car. And in the few minutes that I was there, the lovely parking inspector, saw my error and slogged me with a very expensive parking ticket. And so at the time, starving young student and not really, having a lot of money at the time. And I had to fork out hundreds of dollars for this parking fine, which was a lot at the time. Anyway, I walked back in and there's a Q&A part of the talk that was given, and I was in a very gruff mood. I was all cranky and upset that I'd got slugged with this thing. The teacher asked me, well, what happened? You seem really upset. And I said, I just got a parking ticket. And he goes, oh, what happened? And he said, well, I was in a rush and I parked on the wrong side of the road and my car was facing the wrong direction. And he said, well, that's like your life. And then I was like, oh, and it really hit me. And I was like, wow, this is a pivotal turning point for me, because I was in that industry and not really seeing, the merit of it and feeling a bit lost in it, and then it was like, okay, this is a clear sign from the universe to change direction. And I did. I made a very direct pivot, and that set everything else in motion to meeting, incredible mentors and teachers. And I went full-time art director to full-time hippie and spiritual explorer, and on that quest for, expanding my journey in all kinds of areas in the wellness and spirituality path. So that's how it all happened. It was a parking ticket.
And you certainly wouldn't be the first person to have experienced something like that and had an aha moment and sort of got to that crossroads and decided to go down a different path. Given all of your work in the complementary sort of wellness space over the years, how often do you see that happen with people that you come across?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm speaking with people in this arena all the time. And, I'm also casting for this new documentary that we're filming on the wellness industry. So I've actually had a lot of those, like how did you get started type conversations. And it's usually something, quite, the universe has a way of not being subtle. Like when we're not on path or we're not in where we need to be, we get this proverbial slap in the face or kick in the backside or whatever it is, right? So maybe it's, someone has an accident or there's an illness or there's some, major crossroad where we have to sit up and take notice and go, okay, I can't continue on this trajectory. I'm called to something greater, something different. So I think we find that also in relationships. Sometimes people are in a dysfunctional or difficult relationship, and it has to get so bad or so utterly uncomfortable, and we have to be so upset with us sometimes just to take that initiative to make the change that we need to make. So often it would be great, I think, if people had that innate ability just to get the subtle cue from the universe and go, oh, okay, I'm going to do this. But often we're not like this. We're quite habitual that we want to, stick with the thing until we really get the boot in the backside to make the change. And I certainly had that for me. It was lots of good lessons. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have to listen to those signs or look out for those signs, I find. I know for me, when I first experienced one of those pivotal moments was when I was considering actually starting up Biohacker, and I was walking along the beach in Byron Bay, and I thought, okay, universe, if I'm meant to do this, then give me a sign. I need a sign. And as I'm walking along, all of a sudden this rainbow came out, above the breaking waves, and this dolphin leaped out of the water, and I'm like, okay, great. That's a pretty good sign. Thanks very
That's
much.
pretty correct, isn't it? Yeah. And that's it. And some, the skeptics out there listening might be like, oh, well, that's just chance.
Yeah.
And I would counter that to say there are no chances. There are no, coincidences. There are collisions of minds. There's collisions of certainty that arise in life. And, it's our job to, have the eyes that are open, the ears that are attuned to hear and take those signals, take those messages. And then what comes with that is taking massive action that's in support of our future self. One could say it's that, your future self is also knocking on the door saying, hey, no, we've got to go this way. So, if we look at time as not being linear and something that can be experienced in many ways, then we should also, I think, have the view that it's possible that the future self is also speaking to us and guiding us, So, it can be a mix of things for sure.
I love that idea. And I think that many women listening to this podcast are juggling careers and families and aging parents as well, because we're often the carers for others. What have you seen that are the biggest mistakes that we're making that when it comes to managing chronic stress and just our health and wellness generally?
Yeah, well, often it's the small things that compound over time. And I think stress and overwhelm is a slow creep. We don't usually go 0 to 100, but over time, so I think the remedy to that sometimes is being clear about what's yes and what's no. And a very practical, simple exercise that someone showed me recently, which I love. It's kind of like kinesiology, but you're actually using your swallow reflex in your body. So if you state something that's true, so I'd say, my name is Lawrence Ellyard and I can swallow, right? And I can say, okay, my name is Donald Trump. I physically can't swallow, right? So it's really interesting, and I encourage you to try this, right? So then you can also say, is it in my highest interest to undertake whatever it is, yeah? And then if you can swallow easily, then it's a yes. And if you go like, and you can get more specific, should I start this in 2 months or should I start it next year or whatever it is? So you can narrow it down really specifically. So you could say it's a physiological divination using your swallow reflex. And is that saying, it's a bitter pill to swallow, or that's a tough thing to swallow. And there's a truth in that, So if something isn't right for you, you can't swallow it. Yeah. And if something is right for you, you can. So I've been experimenting with it. Actually, it's very, very cool. And inevitably, it's been very much on the mark. So, encourage people to try that little complementary exercise. Yeah, it's really, really cool.
I'm going to try that. I mean, some people might think it's woo, which is kind of on topic right now for you.
We're all about the woo around here. Yeah.
I think that people often think also that health comes from buying another supplement, as you said, swallowing a pill.
Yeah.
What do you think are some of the most overlooked practices that really don't cost anything? And I suppose that's one of the things in terms of, that swallowing to provide you guidance, but in terms of health and wellness and in the complementary space, what have you seen that's worked most effectively or that's most overlooked?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's lots of things that are for free. Practicing generosity, practicing kindness, being really honest with yourself and others. All of these things that create, great dividends in life. And practical things like, having optimal sleep. If we are in a state where we are unrested and the amygdala in our brain just activates, we're predisposed to negativity or challenges or obstacles. So I think one is to, firstly do a bit of an assessment, and it could be a bit of a lifetime audit where you look at what are all the things that I do, and all the things that I do they light me up? Are they in the spirit of service, and do they cultivate joy? And if they don't, then is there a way to stop doing that thing? Yeah. So in business, we have that, concept of start, keep. And we can do that in our lives. We go like, well, this isn't serving me. It causes me pain and frustration. It's hard. I could stop doing this thing. The idea of being able to wind down effectively at night too, so that we do get the right kind of sleep. What are the habits that we're doing to cultivate good rest, and maybe it's the whole idea of, emptying the mind, getting all of the barrage of content, because we're constantly bombarded, right? If we look at, most people are glued to their phones and they're missing the moment, right? So it's like making sure we put that away, put the phone out of your room while you're sleeping, even get an alarm clock, because people go, oh, I need it. No, I need it for my alarm clock. Well, what did we do before alarm clocks? Before phones, we had alarm clocks, right? And before that, we had the rooster, which we can hear crowing in the back there. The property.
Good old Stan.
That's it. So yeah, coming back to more analog or less digital approaches to what makes us human, what connects us, I think is a great place to start. And also, having this idea of that I am one, the others are many, so therefore it must be important to look after others, right? So when we say, stop doing, if you're a parent, you're like, well, I can't stop parenting, right? And no, well, you could, but that's not in service to your children, right? So I think it's important to look at what are the habits and be very honest and rigorous with ourselves to say, well, I know I do this thing, I know it doesn't serve me, and yet I do it. So what do I need to do? What are the outer circumstances I can do to help support me to, create a more meaningful life, and how I can show up more meaningfully with my partner or my kids or at work and a lot of this comes back to the idea of cultivating presence and living life from a place of generosity. Because again, this idea that the others are many, I'm one. So if I am obsessed with myself, then I find lots of problems. If I change the lens and start looking at how I can be of service and contribute to others, then there's actually good work to do. So I think also we see this dynamic, they have this idea of the drama triangle. There's the persecutor, there's the victim, and there's the rescuer. And I often find that, people can bounce around that quadrant, that triangle quite a lot, but I do see sometimes when we're thinking about our own problems and ourselves, we're very much in the victim mindset, victim mentality. So if we're the victim, of course, all the problems are outside, they're not us, right? So that's firstly, the first is that we're pointing outwards, and rather than looking at, okay, well, how do I get myself in here, and how am I contributing to perpetuate this misery or whatever it is, right? And then there's the other idea that there's always some sort of payoff if I'm the rescuer, because then I'll get the love, or I'll get the support, or I'll get the appreciation, whatever it might be. And of course, if we're being the persecutor, then we're also not a great customer, right? We're being very challenging and creating problems for others and ourselves ultimately. So yeah, the idea I think is to identify when we're caught in the cycle, and it can be as simple as saying, okay, I choose not to do this anymore. And notice the thing, you catch yourself, you can do different ways to pattern interrupt so we don't go into a negative pattern and keep perpetuating it.
But I suppose you have to be conscious of the fact that you're caught in that pattern as well. So what would you recommend to people who may not be that aware that they're in victim mode, as an example?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, a simple thing is to go and get some external eyes on your situation. Yeah. So I've been, working with a good somatic therapist, or, someone who does counseling in a meaningful way. And I'm not a big advocate of talk therapy. I think that's can be a starting point, but it's usually through the body that we experience our trauma. And it's also through the body that we liberate those things. And I think sometimes there's maybe not so much today as there has been in the past, but there used to be this whole thing of like, oh, if I go to therapy because there's something wrong with me. Well, everyone's got something wrong with them, right? Everyone's got something right with them as well. Yeah. So it's the idea that we don't have to be in a dire place to do some analysis. Yeah. So it's a bit like you service your car every however long, right? You should be servicing your body, your mind, your consciousness, your spirit, what nurtures you. So I think often people are looking at the hack for the body, yeah, but they're not looking at what's the hack for the emotional self or the mind or the spiritual self. So it's important to look at these approaches, holistically and, get at many lenses on the interesting thing in the Petri dish, which is our consciousness, right? We see it morphing and we go, oh, what's that? And we can get a bit hooked or attached to a particular nuance or issue. But then we can zoom out and say, okay, well, what are my blessings? What am I grateful for? What are the good things in my life? Okay, how can I amplify those? So again, sometimes it's the idea of just switching the mental awareness from pain to what's pleasurable or joyful. That can be the switch. So there's many approaches, of course, and a lot of the wellness modalities, there's hundreds and hundreds to choose from, right? So I think the biggest thing is actually to start, because most people don't start. They just lament and they complain to their friends, and often they seek advice from super unqualified people trying to be helpful. So sometimes it's good to get independent support where they're not so biased. So
Definitely.
talk to your friends and they'll be like, oh, they'll collude with you and they'll say, oh yeah, you're right, and he is like that, and that is so terrible, and they'll reaffirm what you want to hear because they think they're being helpful. And say like a true friend or someone who's more aware might be say, hey, maybe you're the one who's also contributing to the situation. So my Buddhist master, he sort of said that, a lot of people go through their life that they've fallen over and they landed in a cactus and they're sitting there in the thorns going, oh my God, who did this? This is so terrible. I'm in so much pain, and not actually get up and pull the spikes out of your behind and then go, okay, now what do I do, right? So I'm pointing to total ownership for your problems, being 100% responsible and being accountable for the mess you're in or the joy you're in. It doesn't really matter. Just own it. Start there. And then, take the next action that seems most logical in the moment. So we're all empowered to take action. We're not disempowered. If we are looking at life through that lens, well, we're in the lens of the victim. And so we don't have many options then. So we have to change our lens.
Yeah, completely agree. I think with trauma, it's an interesting one because you mentioned talk therapy, and I haven't found that very beneficial at all. I did go and have some hypnotherapy done, and I found that immensely beneficial. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts on hypnotherapy as a tool to utilize for dealing with trauma within the body?
Yeah, I think it's a very powerful medium, and there's so many other ones. There's like EFT or emotional freedom technique, tapping. There's different types of cognitive practices or somatic therapy or movement, and a whole range of different things. I mean, also one can bypass a huge amount of talk therapy sessions. With a psilocybin journey. Facilitated
Yes.
psychedelic work. Incredibly powerful and breakthrough with obviously the right trusted people.
Yeah.
Certainly not in a party setting. So obviously we've got to approach these things with a level of reverence and respect, and obviously work with people who are qualified and know what they're doing and are doing it for the right reasons. Yeah. So obviously, if we're investing our inner world with someone, we want to make sure they know what they're doing. It's like you wouldn't take your the car to get fixed to Dodgy Dave's mechanics, who is unlicensed and unregistered or whatever, right? Or you wouldn't go on the surgery table from someone who read the book on how to do surgery. Like, you go with someone who's trusted. So it's interesting that when people go into the spiritual realm, sometimes they throw discernment out because they're like, oh, they get caught up in the idea or the concept of the person versus like, well, what's their track record? How have they helped transform other people's lives? And are they independently vetted? I think all that's important because, again, we're trusting something that is lasting, and that's our consciousness, our mind, our spirit. All these things are not something that leaves us when the physical body dies and the consciousness continues on. So I mean, there's that sort of funny saying that don't worry if you don't believe in future lives and past lives, you will in your next one. So it's this idea that, we're constantly in this motion, evolution, and that the time that we have here is precious. And how do we make something lasting and something that can be of contribution, leave our mark in a good way, not create future problems that will come and show their interesting faces down the track. Yeah. So I think it's about cultivating right actions that will support our development, that will help, support others as well.
There's been a real movement in the biohacking space around biohacking technology and the utilization of data to inform us about our health and wellness. You've spoken a lot today about some of the more spiritual aspects and modalities of what we can leverage off to help support us in our journey throughout our lives. How do we balance the objective data with trusting our own intuition? Because I feel like intuition is highly underrated and we've kind of lost the art of that somewhat.
Yeah, and I would always lean towards, it doesn't feel right. So people talk about the idea, gut instinct or feel it in my bones, or the ladies say I feel it in my waters, right? So it's like
I haven't heard that one for a while.
goody, goody, goody. Yeah, so it's like feeling it in your depth, in your spirit, or whatever word, insert appropriate word, right? But there's a sense of I've got a hunch, or I've just got a feeling. I trust that thing. So, and I think we've all had that, walking to the car at night and you've got the keys and you just feel like, oh, something's off. Yeah, you have a feeling, or you go into a room, a new place, and you suddenly go, oh, this doesn't feel right. Yeah. So the body shows, the body goes recoil. Yeah. And so we can think about, just with the swallow test I was talking about before, but we can also just do it in the mind, is this the thing I should work towards? And does our body have a physical feeling of repulsion or attraction? Yeah. And sometimes it's neutral. That's the other thing too. Sometimes it's like, nothing to learn here. Yeah. Or there might be the sense of like, no, this doesn't feel right. So I think the human animal, we're very instinctual. And we have been, if we look at our evolution, this is how we operate. And particularly women, I think, are even more attuned to that. Yeah. You've got the advantage, I'd say. But, I think it's important just to slow it down, tune in, connect to your breath, center yourself, and then call to mind the thing, or think of yourself in the future situation, and then go with that initial impulse, whatever that is. Because it's usually right. What happens is we have like an intuitive sense, or we have a sense of what's right for us. And then our cognitive reasoning brain kicks into, our ego kicks in. Yeah. Goes, no, this, and rationalizes. Yeah. So I think the body is very informative if we can slow down and tune in.
So listen to our body, not necessarily our minds.
Yeah. Or they say, follow your heart, or go with your heart, or go with what uplifts you.
There's growing research linking purpose and social connection with longevity. How do you define spiritual health and why do you think it matters for living well for longer?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of, scientific backed evidence around that if we can create a quietening of the mind and holding, that we have the potential for new and emerging creative expression to arise. There's a lot of science behind, meditation and mindfulness. And I think it's up there with good sleep and nutrition and taking things that support you, your body, your physical system. So I'd say they're all intrinsically linked. There's a lot of correlation between emotion or stress and physical wellness or unwellness. So I'm worried sick. Yeah, there's a saying, because we worry and then we physically get ill, So I think it's important, we see a lot of the trappings of this in our sayings. So I think it's important to take stock of that and just do what is supportive of our, general sense of happiness, what uplifts us as people, and do more of that. Yeah. And also it's good to check the outer environment. So we might be, okay, I'm doing this thing, and do we see that other people in whatever it is we're doing, are they uplifted by it? Or are they like, oh, no, that feels wrong, So the outer environment will often reflect the inner world, So if we change our inner world, then this can start to spill out, and we see it in how other people are around us. Yeah. So, it's about cultivating the right kind of intentions that are going to uplift and support not only us, but also what we see externally in the world, how we are around other people. Sometimes you see it like there's a new couple together and everyone goes like, oh, they see them and they're in love and everyone's just joyful and happy and they feel great. Or you see another couple and they're at each other and everyone around them's like, whoa, this is a very gnarly relationship here. Yeah. And sometimes they don't see it because they're in it, and then they need the honest feedback from the environment, from people.
I see it quite regularly if I go out to dinner somewhere and I'm observing or looking around and I see couples out to dinner together and they're either sitting there on their phones, not engaging with each other or not
Yep.
communicating with each other, or they're just sitting there looking very miserable with each other. And I'm thinking, what's going on
Yeah,
there?
exactly. Yeah, waiting for it to be over, whatever that is. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, so I think we don't have to look far enough upwards to find evidence of what doesn't work. So I'm always interested, okay, well, where's the evidence of what does? And so if you see the couple and they're leaning in and they're just like, oh, and they're just in awe and in service to the other, yeah, then what a gift, yeah. Because if I'm in service to my woman, then she'll be in service to me. Yeah. And I'm not doing it from servitude. I'm doing it from contribution, from wanting to be supportive and be present and grounded. And of course, the feminine loves this, right? So then the femininity, the inner masculine that the feminine has to hold in this day and age, right, gets to relax, and then the femininity can blossom and be present to the masculine, which enriches him, So yeah, this is how it works.
Do you think it also then calls out the feminine within the male as well? Because we all have feminine and masculine within
Yeah.
us. And I think men are so often within their masculinity rather than focusing on being softer and tapping into that feminine side. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think if the woman can be really in her feminine, then it invites the masculine aspect to be more in its vulnerability, which isn't like a seen from a weakness or like a not manly or something. It's more the idea of like his boy can arise. Yeah, he'd be more playful and silly, or be real around, holding a lot, because men hold a lot. I mean, women hold a lot too, but we all hold a lot, right? And we don't often share the burden of that because, for men, it's often why I'm provider and I'm, warrior, and I'll hide my inner world, from the outer because, who's coming at me next, right? And for women, they're having to, show up and be these crusaders in the world and making stuff happen. And that's not always every woman's true essence. And I think I think there's equality and that's all great. And I think there's natural tendencies for masculine and feminine principles. And we can play in both those spaces in our relationships also with our relationship to self. So, I think it's important to have a broad view of what might be possible within ourselves, and we get to explore different aspects with different people. Yeah. And again, having, a trusted therapist where we can perhaps explore these different aspects can be a good starting point. And again, you don't need something broken to do it, right? You just do it because it's, I want to improve myself.
I think that sometimes women are sitting a lot in their masculine side because there's so much expectation placed on us these days to be everything to everyone. And I think that even the notion of being more in your feminine side can sometimes be misinterpreted by women. You touched on that. You didn't mean that to be in a subservient way at all. And I just want to make
No.
sure that people aren't misinterpreting the intention there.
Yeah, well, the intention is that we're not in servitude, we're in service to, and that's a big distinction. So again, am I in service to the thing that uplifts and enriches my partner, for example, or for my kids, So again, one is like being a martyr, the other is actually, consciously bringing gifts to the other from a place of surplus. And of course, if we don't have surplus, then we need to fill our cup, So it's the, on the airline, put your face mask on first before helping others. It's that idea, right? But often I think a lot of women, they are almost too much in service to others. Yeah, they leave themselves last and they leave themselves run, empty because they're not supporting and filling their cup, So I think it's important that women spend time with women friends and men spend time with men friends, and then they help create the polarity, then they come together, and that's where the sparks fly, right? And, so getting support, and we're meant to be, a village, and we're very isolated sometimes. And I think also women are super competitive with each other. I mean, guys can be, but I think it's even more so with women, comparing and this and that. And it's like, well, actually, we're all sisters and brothers, so why don't we come together and see where our commonalities lie? And we all put our pants on one leg at a time, so that there's commonalities. So So find the good, find the thing that enriches you and amplify that.
Energy medicine, I think, is often misunderstood. How do you explain it to someone who's naturally skeptical but is genuinely curious?
Yeah, well, firstly, I would say have a direct experience because again, everyone has opinions, and unless they're grounded in direct experience, it's hard for us to make a call. So again, I would just sort of encourage people to, one, work with someone who you vetted and they're of a good standard, and then have a direct experience and then make a call on it. So I'd go in with the idea of possibility, not like fixed mindset. So sometimes, people are going through life like the horse with the blinkers, like they walk around like this and oh, it's like this. And it's like, no, there's actually hundreds of possibilities that can be present in a situation. So it's about getting clear about what you want to create or call into your life, and then being open to allow the thing to come to you in the right way. It's like you're driving your car and you put the GPS in and you're driving down the highway and it says, oh, traffic up ahead. If you go this way, it's 10 minutes faster. So it reroutes, So again, like the universe is rerouting all the time, conspiring to create whatever it is that we are focused on. So if we're focused on, calamity and drama and misfortune, guess what we get? Lots of. Yeah. And again, we get really clear about self-love, self-worth, and that the universe is actually an abundant place, and we keep at that. And eventually, we start to see more of that manifest in our lives. So the idea is that we're the ones that are ultimately driving and steering the ship where it can go, versus being adrift at sea because we decided that we weren't the captain. Yeah. So allow life to come towards us and get clear about what you want to create, and then see what magic unfolds.
Have you found that there are some types of energy medicine that are better for some things as opposed to others? I mean, you've done Reiki, shamanic healing. You're kind of a bit of an expert on many different types of
Yeah.
modalities. What are your favorites, and what have you found them to be most beneficial for?
Yeah, there's all sorts of ones. I mean, I think some of the most profound things that I have found that are free, for starters, is mindfulness practice and meditation, because I don't need to pay for that, right? I can just choose to be more conscious and being more in presence. But that said, yeah, there's lots of different modalities out there, and a lot of them are very powerful and transformative. And I'm a big fan of somatic work, body work, in terms of, things like hypnotherapy that you mentioned can be very powerful. But again, I think it comes down to the individual. And, there's probably a reason why there's like 1,400 different wellness modalities in the market, right? Because there's like so many different approaches. So,
And it can get confusing, right?
oh, for sure. And overwhelming, right? So many choices. Yeah. I mean, I can tell you my favorites, but it's so personal and bespoke. So I think it's important that people, again, if something is in your face, maybe it's something worth investigating. And if it keeps showing up, then again, it's the universe corralling you in a certain direction. So perhaps that's where we look and explore that, So I think it's very much a personal experience to see what lights you up and what is good results for you, So again, one size does not fit all. It's not one approach or these are the top 5. I mean, these are, again, it's just opinions, right? So
Yeah.
it's up to the individual.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's lots of people out there that struggle with meditation and prefer some other options. But it's like I've even gone down the path of trying things like ayahuasca and peyote and as well. And look, ayahuasca was a bit of an eye opener for me. That was pretty full on, I must say.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
haven't tried psilocybin yet, and I'm a bit hesitant to try that, but.
I'd highly recommend it because it's not as confronting as, say, ayahuasca is that's very direct. Whereas, yeah, something psilocybin in a facilitated way with a very experienced person could be a gentle opening. Yeah. So one doesn't need to go full hero hallucinogens and, that whole thing. One can go very gently and work in a microdose type arrangement. There's different approaches, right? So I think it's important to see, again, come back to the experience of the practitioner and then do your due diligence and then go gracefully, gently and see what comes out of it. If it supports you and you see the benefit, then you can go deeper, but have it as a gradual opening rather than a one and done because often people will have experiences where they want the magic pill that solves all the problems, and it's not often like that. It's a gradual process. It's like you wanna get fit at the gym. You don't go once and then suddenly the transformation occurred. It takes time and it's through repetition very often. But some particular practices, if they're very aligned to you, can be a bit of a fast track, you could say. You'll get results quite quickly, and other people, it may not be their thing. And it might be because it's not the person they're working with isn't a good fit. So it's like, are we attracted to them or are we repelled? So like magnets. And if it's not the right connection, we'll immediately go, different directions. And that's also good.
There's now hundreds of complementary therapies that are available, and I think we've spoken a little bit about how confusing it can be to try to figure out what's right for you. But it's not just necessarily about figuring out what's right for you, but it's also about making sure that you're finding the right person to work with or the right practitioner to work with. What are some tips that you can give our listeners to ensure that somebody that they do decide to seek out the support with is sufficiently skilled and someone rather than someone that's just good at marketing, perhaps?
Yeah, exactly. And that's often the line, isn't it? It's like, oh, this is very clever. And with AI, it's getting harder to tell, right? So is it clever marketing or is it actual impactful? And sometimes it's both, actually, because, there's some amazing therapists and they're also really good at their marketing, or they've got someone doing that for them. So just because there's good marketing doesn't mean there's something wrong with it. And other times it's just like, wow, it's really clever marketing, but there's not much substance. So I'd always look at third-party sort of independent reviews, also ones from friends or, colleagues or whatever that, trusted advisors, people that you would be happy to tell a secret to and know that they'd hold it. This is often a good measure. And also, like, what are the affiliations of the practitioner or the therapist or whoever it is, so I mean, my company, IICT, a global accreditation body, professional recognition body for the wellness industry. So the people that come through our doors or who get, certified and vetted by us, we hold to a very high standard. So that can help as well. So industry independent certification, check, your Trust pilots and your Google reviews and all that stuff. And if there's enough consistent proof. And then, of course, do your own research, run them through AI and see what's out there. And then, of course, have a direct experience and see if it clicks or not. People know within the first minute or two if there's a natural connection or not.
You've traveled a lot in this space around the world, and we were speaking the other week and you were talking to me about coming back from Richard Branson's island and having done some work there. What are your thoughts in regards to what's evolving in the wellness industry and what's really exciting you today in terms of anything new that's coming through that we may not have heard of or that may not be as popular at the moment?
Well, I think there's a lot of, certainly a lot of new technologies in biohacking, but also just in the wellness movement. So there's a lot of exciting new technologies that we got to explore and, that use sound and light and vibration and all these different, so these are great devices. And I think the other emerging trend is the wish for people to have in-person experiences or community-based wellness is definitely an emerging trend. And I think that there's a big push towards that because, if we look at what happened like with COVID, where everything went online, everyone pivoted and there's all this online delivery. And now like there's such a swing back to what is human and what is this, interaction between us in our community and having a sense of like who's our tribe, who are our like-minded friends on the path, so that the idea of a sangha, the right kinds of minds coming together and sharing ideas and creating community. And I think that's a big push towards coming back to grassroots and, more traditional values, things like that. Yeah, because we see in the digital world, everything's CGI or it's AI and like no one knows what's real anymore, right? So then human animal goes, well, what's grassroots? So I think, festivals and summits and retreats like this is definitely an emerging trend I'm seeing.
Yeah, there's lots coming through at the moment.
Yeah, that's great, right? Because you get to hang out and be with the right people. Yeah, isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, it sure is. I know when I first started studying integrative nutrition, and I thought, oh my gosh, I found my people. That was the exact feeling that I had. And it's so lovely to be able to engage and hang out with like-minded people, I think. Now, tell me a little bit more before I let you go about this documentary that you're working on, because I'm super curious about that.
Yeah, well, as I said, I'm the founder of the International Institute for Complementary Therapists, which we use the acronym IICT because it's way shorter. So I was promoting my company in the US, and then I met with the directors of the Biohack Yourself magazine, and they've Lolly Brands Productions, and they've produced over 18 award-winning documentaries in the wellness and health and biohacking space. And I was really just joking with the director because I was supposed to be in one of their films and I just missed out the filming window. And I said, oh, well, why don't we do a film about the wellness industry? And he was like, oh, you mean all the woo-woo people? And I was like, yeah, all the woo crowd, and he's like, well, what would you call it? And I was like, we'll call it the new woo, so that's how we kind of came up with the name. But it's the idea that, what has been considered, woo-woo stuff is becoming more and more mainstream, right? So the idea behind the film is to bring together, the world's most sought after and well-known wellness professionals and pioneers and founders, and showcase all the different modalities in documentary form. So, yeah, this is a project we're, in sort of the final stages of casting for, and we've got, close to 40 experts now secured to do this filming. So we'll be doing this in the US later this year and some additional filming early next year in LA. And the idea is to, showcase this documentary out to the world to reach as many, new audiences, because it's one thing to preach to the choir, right? All the people who know and use this and trust this work. But it's more important, I think, the message is like, how do we shape and create new paradigms for health and wellness, and spirituality as we emerge, in this age. So, that's really the goal, to reach a lot of new people that, may have just sort of trusted a pharmaceutical route or a medical model and not looked at something that's more in the complementary or wellness space. So I think, there's merit, of course, in both, but it's about, the best of both worlds, not just one or the other.
Yeah, definitely. I think it sits quite nicely, though, as well, with this trend around preventative and personalized medicine. So it'll be really interesting to see the end result. So where can people connect with you, Lawrence, and learn more about what you do?
Yeah, so I mean, probably the easiest would be to go to lawrenceellyard.com, and I think you'll probably have that in the show notes, a link to my website. You could also look me up on Instagram, Lawrence Ellyard, and we also have the, anyone who's a wellness practitioner or educator, then it's IICT.com is our accreditation body that I mentioned. And then for the film, you'd go to biohackyourself.com, and that's showcases all the work that the production company that I'm working with and the impact that's having globally, which is a pretty significant splash. And we've got some amazing people, in that ecosystem. So lots of good stuff there to share and experience.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for your time today and sharing all of your wonderful knowledge.
Yeah, it was great to be on the show. And I hope there's a few little pearls of wisdom that can be used by the audience. And if we wake a few people up in the process, or they get some little nuggets of things that they can use in their life, then that's a job well done.
Most definitely. Thanks so much, Lawrence.
Okay, thanks so much. Cheers.
Well, that's a wrap for today's podcast. Thank you for tuning in. And if you'd like to learn more about biohacking, go ahead and sign up on my website at www.biohack-her.com to get a free copy of my 5 top biohacks to get you kick-started. While you're there, you can also check out my blog page for more tips on biohacking. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, you can do so on Apple, Spotify, and Google Play. Let us know if there's anyone you'd like us to talk to in particular, and we'll endeavour to get them on the podcast. Until next time, remember to live well longer.